Hello, I'm Philip from FTC Team 16072, the Quantum Quacks, and today we're going to be talking about the new Mindstorms program, Mindstorms Home. So our agenda for today is we're going to do a basic walkthrough of how Mindstorms Home works, and where to find the EV3 blocks that you know and love, what they look like in Mindstorms Home. So let's get started. So this is the home screen for the new Mindstorms Home. It starts out, you've got models up at the top, you've got old projects down at the bottom. I've been playing around with it a bit, so I've got a couple. So we're just going to start out here with a new project. So an important thing to note if you're coming from EV3G is Mindstorms Home only has one program for a project. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of really important. A project only has one program. So before, if for FLL you made a My block that was a drive CM and you used it for multiple programs, you either have to recreate that drive CM for every single one of your projects, which is a pain, or you have to make a master program. So we will be releasing a video later on master programs, so make sure to hit subscribe so you can get notified when that comes out. You can also look at our Weebly. The link's in the description for that, but the Weebly has all of the scripts and what stage they're in and where we're at with each video. So that's basically how projects work. A project is all one giant flat file screen. So if you're used to Scratch, this will look very familiar to you. So the way you look around, so you can pan by just clicking and dragging. You can zoom in and out, not with the scroll wheel, but you have to come down and click these buttons down here. So zoom in, zoom out, and that resets it back to a normal thing. So I zoom way out and click that, and that resets it to normal. You also have undo and redo buttons back here. So if I don't like that, I can undo it. Pretty straightforward. Downloading, down here in the wait, hold up. Downloading is down here in the bottom right where my camera is covering up because I'm not really going to be talking about it a lot. But this blue button is download and run from EV3G, and this down arrow is just download. An important thing to note is if you're on a Spike Prime, you can only have one project. So if you're a Spike Prime, you really need a master program. If you're on an EV3, you could get away without one, but it's suboptimal. Again, master program video in EV3 Home is coming. It's in the works. So I'm going to go through real quick and talk about what the colors mean. And this is going to be very brief. I'm going to come back to each of these sections later with more detail, more in depth, but this is just a real quick, just so that no one gets confused when they look at it. And as a note, I am colorblind, so I'm going to read this off of a script real fast. But yeah, so dark blue, that's the motors. Pink, these are movement blocks. So dark purple is display. Pink, light purple is sound. Light yellow, events. Orchard dark yellow, control. Light blue is for sensors. Then we've got green for operators. Variables, when they're made, are orange, and my blocks, when they're made, are red. Okay. So I'm going to just delete these two that I made real quick. So how does flow work in Mindstorms Home? Because in EV3G, you had those little lines that you connected, and you could follow what happened by the way the lines worked. So the way flow works in Mindstorms Home is you've got these little nubs. So if a block has a hole at the top, it can be added on top of a nub, and if it's got a nub at the bottom, then another thing can be added to the end. So like for example, there's some blocks like a stop and exit program block that doesn't have a nub, which means you can't put anything after it. Another thing like that is the repeat forever block. Nothing can go after that because it goes for forever. So then there's also these are non-returning blocks, the ones with nubs. If something's a returning block, that means it can fit into one of these slots. So for example, this sensor right here, this can't fit directly on the stack. You can't put it on there, it won't run. What you can do is put it in a variable spot like that. So this is a returning block, this is a non-returning block. That's the terminology I'm going to use. Other people might call it something different, but that's what I'm going to call it. So there's two primary types of variables in Mindstorms Home. We've got the Boolean, which is pointy. So Boolean means true false. That's the technical computer science term for it, is Boolean. No, I don't know how that's spelled. But so if it's pointy like that, that means it's true or false. So if I put it into a number, then it's going to become 1 or 0. And if I put it into a string, it's going to become the word true or false. Then this rounded is either a number or a string. It can deal with both of them just as fine. So something interesting to note is if it looks like it'll fit graphically, then it'll work programmatically. So you can put a Boolean inside of a number or a text, but you can't put, see how a round won't fit into the, that doesn't make sense, that won't work. A round can fit into a round, and a pointy can fit into a round, but a round can't fit into a pointy. And so that's their way of trying to graphically represent how you can convert back and forth between values, which I think is actually a pretty decent job. They also make it so you can't even try. It'll highlight the ones that you can try and put it in. So see how it's highlighting that? And if I let go while it's highlighted, it will just snap in there. But if I try and do it here, there's no highlight. To delete a block, you can either click on it and press delete, or you can drag it over the sidebar. Yeah, so every single one of these things that starts with a round hump like that at the top and then has the nubs at the bottom is called a stack. That's the Mindstorms Home terminology for it. And so some things refer to stacks. So for example, you can say stop other stacks, stop this stack, stop all stacks. So that's just helpful to know what the terminology is for, it's called a stack. Okay, so on to the next part of our agenda for today. We also want to go through all the blocks that are in EV3G and mention how you could replicate them in EV3 Home. So this is going to be fairly quick, and it's going to sound like me just reciting a lot of information that is mostly identical, but we're going to go for it. Okay, so favorite blocks from EV3G, action blocks. So motion large motor blocks, medium and large motor blocks, sorry, they're in the motors tab. They don't separate anymore, they're all just a motor. So that's, some people like that, some people don't. It's just motors now. There's no distinction between large, medium, spike prime, large, spike prime, medium. They're all the same. Move steering and tank, they are in the movement section. So here's a move steering, and here's a move tank. Those work pretty much exactly the same way. So the display block, all those options are here in the display section. And yes, what used to be one block is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 different functions. And yeah, it's suboptimal, but that's what it is. Sound block, sound section, same thing here. I mean, there's some options, less options than an EV3G, and it's more blocks to pick from. Status lights is in the display section. That's identical to EV3G. There's not really a difference there. Except for the fact that in EV3G you could use a variable to determine which one of these, and in Mindstorms Home you can't. Flow control tab. So the start is the events. We actually have a lot more options here. So we can start either when the program starts, when a color sensor sees a certain color, when a touch sensor is pressed, when any Boolean condition is true, which is really cool, or when a random timer that we start gets above a certain second count. Then we have wait, switch, and loop. So all of those are in control. So here we've got our waits. We've got our wait for time, wait for Boolean. We don't have a built-in wait for each type of sensor. You've got to build those yourself, which is not the end of the world, but could be annoying. Then we've got our loops. So repeat X many times, forever, repeat until blank. We've got our switches, which were what they were called in EV3G. Now they're actually called if-then statements or if-then-else statements, which is the more programmatically correct term. But they're right here. This is just if. This is if-else. You can't have more cases than that. If you want to have more cases than that, then you've got to nest it like so. Then loop interrupt. There's not really a clean option for this, so we're gonna say that there's no clean option for this. There's another video coming out very soon that will be talking about how to replicate some of the more bizarre features in EV3G and EV3 Home that there isn't a direct correlation for, and in that video we'll talk a lot about how to replicate the loop interrupt function. So then sensors, in order to the rotation sensor is in motors. You go grab a degrees counted. The rest of them are in the sensor section. If you'll notice something, there isn't a gyro. So in order to see a gyro, you've got to come down here to this all code blocks at the bottom of the code blocks thing, and you've got to click it, and that'll add a whole bunch of them actually, that just give you more options, and one of those more options is indeed a gyro. So that's pretty cool. It's unsure how this will look with the Spike Prime because I don't own one. Someone who does might throw it in the comments, but if you have a Spike Prime, you have 6 axes, so there probably will just be more options here to pick what axis. So then, data operations tabs. That used to be the red tab. The variables, here in the variables, they work pretty similar. You make a variable, you name it, so and so you can set it, you can change it by, and you can read it. An interesting thing here is with EV3G you could pick what data type you wanted the variable to be. You don't have that choice anymore. It's got to be a number string. You can't make a Boolean out of it. So in order to make a number thing that's actually a Boolean, you've got to compare it, which is kind of infuriating, but is what it is. Constant, there isn't a constant block anymore. You just have to use a variable, and from my personal preference, and I didn't follow this one, I just made this one, so I'll make it again. Variables should follow something called camel case. So that means the first word is undercase, all lowercase, then the next word starts with a capital letter. So like test variable, like that. A constant should be all caps and should say constant in it, or just all caps. So like if I wanted to, and should not have them directly up to each other, it should have a underscore. So if I wanted to have a wheel circumference constant, then I would put it all caps like that to make it really obvious to people. Hey, you know, this is a constant. Sometimes I'll even, and this is completely up to people, but sometimes I'll say like z const, which what that does is, since these are sorted alphabetically, it automatically puts it at the bottom of the list so that you don't see it cluttering up everything else, and then the constant makes it really obvious that that's a constant. Okay, arrays. So in this variables section, there's this thing called a list. It should follow the same capitalization as a variable, and it lets you delete all of it, add an item to it, replace an index with an item, or so replace an item, add an index with another thing, get a specific item of the list, get the length of the list. So that's actually, you know, for the most part, all the functions you need out of an array for FOL. It can let you do some really cool things if you use it right. Math, round, logic options, text, and random are all here in this operators. So math is right here. There's no advanced math block. The closest we get is this one, which has some functions, and these two. But that means that any more complicated thing you want to do, you have to completely build yourself. So if I wanted to say, whoops. So if I wanted to take the rounded mod of so like the absolute value of my variable, that just kind of looks ugly. An important thing to note, once you start stacking inputs like this, you have to grab the base input. So that's this round. If you grab something else, so like this absolute value of, it'll just pull it out. Or this mod, it'll pull it out, which is not what you want. So you want to make sure you always know what you're grabbing so that you grab the right things. So yeah, round, I just mentioned it. In EV3G, you also had a truncate option on this block. You don't anymore. You just have a round. In EV3G, you got to pick how many decimal places you want to round. You don't anymore. You just got to round. This rounds it to an int. Yeah. Oh well. Logic options and or not. We don't have anything more fancy than that. If you want anything more fancy than that, build it yourself using the and or not. So that's exciting because those get big in a hurry. Then comparison, which was a block. That's these. So that's less than, equal to, greater than. Yeah, you've heard me, right? There's no greater than, equal to, or less than or equal to, which is probably the most common. So in order to do that, you've got to say less than or equal to yourself like that. And so you've got to put the value in twice, and you've got to put the variable in twice. One cool thing is if you look at it, if you click on it, it'll tell you whether it's true, which is kind of handy. So like if I drag this out, it'll say false. When I put it back in, since it's false or true, it's true, which is a handy way to be able to debug some things real fast. If you've got a brick connected, it'll even do that using your current sensor values if that's what the program's reading or whatever, which is super helpful for debugging. Something I kind of wish EV3G had. You can mouse over a line if it's download and run, but you can do it anytime here, even if you're not downloading and running. So that's very cool. text is actually the one thing that's improved, in my opinion. Before, we just had join. Now we have length. Wahoo, I guess. Kind of cool. You can get the length of a string, but still nothing more fancy to be able to splice it or anything like that. So, still kind of a hassle there. Range block is just completely gone. I'll be talking about how to, like you can make a range block yourself using the less than or equal to and greater than, but that's pretty long. You can make a my block that handles it all. That's what I'd recommend. There will be a lot of my blocks that do things that were one block in EV3G, but you need it because it's not anymore. So that's just kind of something you have to accept. So then here's where it's about to get exciting. So the advanced tab is basically all gone. File access, gone. Yes, that's super useful in FLL. No, there's no way to do it in Mindstorms Home that I've found. If someone has something, if there's something that proves me wrong, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd love to find this out. Experiments, gone. They were kind of a bizarre thing with EU3G anyway. And I guess Mindstorms just decided they didn't want them for Mindstorms Home. Bluetooth messages are actually still here, which is interesting. They're in control. They're in events. So you can broadcast a message or when you receive a message. Yeah, so like you can say message when I receive, and then same message. And that's worthless for FLL, but if you do something else with your EV3s or spike primes, like sumo bots where you remote control one using another one, that's pretty useful. I've yet to test whether you can do a Bluetooth message from an EV3 to a spike prime. I think that'd be something kind of cool to look at, but haven't looked at it yet. Keep awake, gone. Just gone. Raw data, gone. You've got to use all their stupid algorithms to look at any sensors now, so that's suboptimal. Unregulated motor block, gone. Again, to control a motor, you've got to put it through all their stupid algorithms, so that's suboptimal. Most teams use their normal motor block anyway, but for the more advanced teams that wrote their own controllers to handle all that, that's not really an option anymore. Not with Mindstorms Home anyway. I think something interesting, and this is a tangent here, but something interesting that they seem to be doing with Mindstorms Home is they're trying to split it. So they want their beginners to use Mindstorms Home and the more advanced people to use MicroPython, which is a great option for people that are more advanced and are willing to try a text-based language. And we'll have videos coming out on MicroPython very shortly. We just wanted to start with Home because that's where a lot of people are looking at, especially as Mac with the new iOS 14. With macOS 10.14, you can't get EV3G anymore because it's a 64 app. Anyway, tangent over, sorry. Where was I? Invert motor block, gone. Yeah, you heard me right. It's gone. It's a deal, I guess. Stop block is here. It's in control. I already kind of showed it. You can stop all the other stacks, which is useful for some funky hack things, especially regarding master programs and interrupts. And I'll show off how I think this should be used in a later video. Comment block. There's no comment block anymore. I haven't... The way to make a comment is you... I'm going to show what I did again. You go to a clear part of the canvas, right click, and then say add comment. And then it forms a little sticky note. And so you can say something like, say, comment describing how to make comments. And then you can resize it. You know, you can move it around. You can collapse it and expand it, which is kind of cool. You can either click this X to delete it, or you can drop it over there. So then that's all in the Advanced tab. So in the last tab is the My Block tab. It's right here. You've lost a lot of functionality, so there's no more outputs. You can't add icons. You can't add icon inputs. You can't, like, for example, if I add a number here, before I could turn that into a slider and I could give it range caps and I could do all sorts of cool stuff. You can't do that anymore. You've got to do that internally. Ugh. Whatever. So what's new? What I've mentioned some of it briefly, but what are things that I actually like about here? So the three biggest ones, okay? So number one, we have the fact that you can get a value out of it just by clicking on it at any time, and it will give you its best estimate of value, which is super helpful for debugging. You can do this even if it's not running. Number two, there's a length of text, which again is questionably useful, but does allow you to do some more cool things with some variables. Like you can join, you can you can do some cool things with variables. I might do a video on why I like this later. And there's no need, so in EV3G, sometimes you'd have threads that had checker loops in them. So all they'd be doing is looping and waiting for a certain condition to be met. And when that condition was met, then it would execute some code. You don't need those anymore, because in control, we've got all these variable starts. So like when the center button's pressed, start this stack, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and say thanks for watching. If you have any questions or video ideas, feel free to drop them in the comment section or shoot us an email. We'll be releasing more Quacktastic videos on topics like this and other topics relating to FLL. So if you want to see those, stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button. If you want to see our roadmap, so that's what scripts we're working on, what stage all these different videos are in, so you can see when the video you want specifically is heading and what our priority for it is. Head over to our Weebly. The link will be down in the description. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.